Good to be here for I don't know how many years it's been, but it's been a lot. And I guess I can get on my slides here. There's just a little bit more about myself and what I'm going to cover a little bit from the past. And I'm going to go back quite a ways for some of you guys in the room. I see you, and I know you had some issues back in 2007, 2012 with Aster Yellow. So I'm going to just kind of highlight a few things from the past, and then we'll go on to what I expect this next year. NDON is the most common weather reporting site that anybody or we all follow. I don't know why these numbers, can you actually make them out? No, okay. Okay, anyway, that's total rainfall. Oh yeah, this is the one from just this last weekend in Fargo. They almost broke their drought at basically 3 inches of rain in December. That was December 22nd to the 26th. They had flooding in Fargo, so we're concerned about drought in this area. And golly, it can change on a dime, but that was pretty unusual. All this 3 to 4, 5 inches down at Fargo. That was just kind of amazing for this time of the year. So I'm going to jump into a lot of different things back and forth, and most of the charts, hopefully you can make them out. This year is the acres for North Dakota, 1.9 million acres. I thought we'd hit 2 million, but I'm sure in 24 we'll hit 2 million. Average yield in North Dakota just came out at 1,790 pounds. And some won't agree, but I was at Roseau for the Minnesota canola growers back in early December. In Minnesota, they only have like 80,000 acres, but that northern tier I'll show you in a bit, but they ended up with a 2,500 pound average. They didn't get any more rain than here, but North Dakota, the western part, we really dropped our yield. And these are just our counties. We know where the acres are, where they're going up. This is kind of a good look, but again, not as clear as I wish it was. But up here, this northern Minnesota, all this yellow is our higher canola producing areas. And obviously, cooler weather. If you look at the end on site at Roseau, it's pretty close to Langdon. Very cool nights. Doesn't really get hot, and they're really pulling off some tremendous yields that way. This is, I don't know if you can make it all out, but for canola and all these oilseed crops, it's just a whole different picture we're in now with this renewable diesel, biodiesel. It's just the I don't know, it's never ending of how much oil can be used. And some feel that we won't produce enough of canola oil, soybean oil, and so on if we just keep on with this trend for the need for the renewables. I just put a chart here. I don't know if you can make it out. Okay, advantage with canola, obviously we're the highest, I should shift here. Highest percent oil, and that's not the new to anybody, but when you guys are envisioning you're at home taking your oil jug to fill the combine or tractor, whatever, or your sprayer, the 2.5 gallon jugs, that 1 bushel of canola will produce roughly 2.5 gallons of oil when it's pressed. And that's a lot of oil out of 1 bushel. So canola is really in the driver's seat for the percent of oil. And soybean, obviously it's 17% oil to 20. You're only getting 1 gallon out of a bushel. So now you start thinking of just those numbers before I talk about renewable. How can we be looking at biodiesel if you got a bushel of soybean at what, $12 a bushel today, roughly, and it produces 1 gallon of diesel or oil, $12 a gallon. I don't think anybody's going to put that kind of diesel in their vehicles. So what's helping all this, the push for this, is obviously the government support. They're just pushing dollars out into the whole renewable energy, renewable fuels, the whole climate change. So that's the driving force. But this is interesting when they talk about it. They said, okay, let's go with the soybean, a gallon of oil produced out of a bushel when you crush it, okay? But the renewable diesel is ready to go right into your diesel tractor, pickup, whatever. Doesn't need any conditioning. It flows just like diesel oil. But they have to refine it so far down that you get actually that 2.5 gallon of oil off the canola, you only get about a quart of diesel. So now you use the renewable, the cost of producing that, and you're only getting a quart of oil out of that 2.5 gallon. So it's this whole thing. So it's about, I guess I put the note in the bottom here, about 0.12 of a gallon per se. So it's the future for the amount of oil they need. If this renewable keeps carrying on, it's endless. We just need to produce more and more oil. I know there was a question about why are the prices down now, or we're importing a lot. It's all just a market thing right now, our dollar and so on. But the future, if you just remember this from today, and you've seen this I accumulate this from attending meetings all winter and last several, but that renewable, it's quite a small number you get out of a gallon of crushed oil. And then they can use the renewable out of your tallow, all kinds of different used oils. But what this is going to do, while I'm thinking of it, it's going to give us probably an opportunity for some of our low quality canola. If we get back to frost issues, you get that green seed count, you get that darkened oil. And obviously for the edibles, edible oil, they don't want the dark oil. They want that nice clear oil. So they could just go into one of these renewables and you'll have a use for that. But the price, when you start balancing it, it just doesn't make sense for the price of grain, or how high it's got to go. So anyway, canola in North Dakota is a $2 billion industry. I did get this last year a drone, and I like to fly around, and I'm going to do more on canola. This is a drain tile project. Just fun to look at it from the air. This is a canola field, and I just wanted to point that out. This lodged area here, we aren't talking much about diseases, but that's lodging from Verticillium stripe. So, but anyway, field like that was really good. We'll get into that later. Brian Hansen talked about this in the grain one, but here, this is what May 1 to October 31st. Here, Langdon's what do you have to look at? 8.5, almost 9 inches below normal. Now, that's an awful dry summer. And to produce the yields that we talked about and the guys are talking about, it's unbelievable. But I got a few things I want to show you on soils and so on. But that's quite a deficiency in water in this entire area, the Lake Region area up through here, Langdon, Wales, Clyde, Calvin, and down here, Hettinger. I got some comparisons. They were well over their normal precip. Well, I grabbed this slide. I was going through them last night. I said, I know I'm going to take, or if I get cut off, I want to hit a few items. And I brought this slide up from the back. Herbicide carryover, when we're talking that dry of a year at 8, 9 or less, probably 6, 7 inches, we're going to have a tremendous amount of herbicide carryover issues because we just didn't have the moisture to break it down. So as you're planning your crop rotations, keep that in mind. I was at a meeting the other day and it, I'm not letting me back up. Okay, here's a Clearfield canola. This is a plot. They had a Prosper. See, this is all the plot laid out, and here's some green canola. Well, that was a Clearfield variety, but that was pursuit carryover for 2 years ago, and they put their plot out there is actually the variety development group out of Fargo, and look what it did. It just bared it right out. So for you guys, anybody using the pursuit or these here authorities, Spartan, we have to be aware of that. Okay, PLC, I'm not going to talk about it. This is you guys forgetting just canola. But all our crops, this next farm bill is huge. And as you all know, they tabled everything until probably next fall. So what we're going to hope they do as we're looking at it is these reference prices are huge. And that's what we need to make sure our political or our farm organizations work to increase all these. Because what these numbers are, your reference prices, basically that's your floor price. Could be your minimum price. And canola, man, if you guys remember, they came out so good at the 20 cents a pound. That was our floor price. This was established in 2014, and we had payments for the first 6, 7 years of $70 an acre. The last 2 we haven't because our price has been above that. So we want these reference prices. The higher we can get them, the more payment or more protection you will get for getting crop insurance. But this is the big thing. So corn at $3.70 a bushel. Those guys are going to be obviously fighting for the last 2-3 year average of $5. Well, then that's your price support. So canola, we're hoping that we could be in that 28 to 29. And so it's just a big thing because that has nothing to do with, again, crop insurance. That will be your protection for your base acres. So whatever you hear the guys talk about, reference prices, the number, it just as high as you can get them. Soybeans really got short at that time compared to these smaller oil seeds, canola, sunflower, and flax. Soybeans, they're going to be pushing for a higher figure, obviously, because it's pretty well averaged $10 to $12, but then hopefully these others are going to tag up. So just mentioning that for your own reference. Crop insurance is obviously the biggest thing we have had the last several years, and I just put the numbers here. You probably can't make it out, but last spring we were at, or this last spring, 27 cents. The fall price ended up 25 cents. So we had, and now for this next year, we'll start here and just 1st of February, we'll be setting the price. We're going to watch those future markets. And it looks like we'll estimate it at 24 cents. Lots of time for these to go up, but that's key, is all you guys know. Crop insurance is the driving force that we need to protect our bottom line. Varieties, I'm not going to say much. You got all the boots out there. We've got a Roundup Ready, True Flexes. You got Roundup Ready and Liberty in the same combination. The winter canola, that's all I can say about it. It doesn't work here, probably never will. That's a plot that nothing came up at Langdon. And canola, I mentioned this always, and I think that's the driving key for the big yields we had in most of the areas, is that you can have some hiccups, but that plant will just keep flowering. So my diagram here always is, if conditions are perfect, you'll get this flowering and you'll tail off after like 20 days. With canola, wheat, it's going to flower in that, what, 1 to 2 day period. The head's done flowering. If it didn't do a good job, that's all you're gonna get. You have some heads that are flowering a little bit later, but with canola, we have a couple issues with flowering, some heat, let's say 4 or 5 days of heat. Your flowering will drop back, then the conditions improve, you cool off, and this will come back up. So you have that long flowering period to produce more flowers and potentially maintain your yields. Let's talk about the showers. This is another, this is a precip from 6/1, June 1 to September 9th. Again, here's Langdon at 4 inches of rain from June 1 to September 1. Almost record setting. I got some other charts to show it, but just unheard of. And this again was that real dry zone right up in through here. Down in the southwest, they had lots of moisture. The precipitation, when people talk about, if we talk about diamondback moth for a while, but 2023, these are the numbers for the moisture at Langdon, and we use Langdon because that has the longest term data or longest running data. So anyway, 4/10 of an inch, so 5 inches of rain from May through August. Now that's 5 inches. What can you grow on that? So I look back and thinking, you older guy, I shouldn't older, you're young. I'm considered young, so you guys are young. But if you remember 88, that year, I kind of went for the numbers, and what you know, here they are, exactly the same amount of precip in 88 through August 1st for the total for the period, 5 inches of water. What happened in 88? Very, very poor yields. Canola, I remember 400 or 500 pound, maybe an odd one got to 1,000, but that was some real good heavy ground. So we did a lot in 23 versus 1988 on the same amount of moisture. But obviously varieties get a lot of credit. The varieties have improved so much, but it's kind of an interesting number. Those are either around in 88 when you compare those numbers. I mentioned this to soils, and I'm not expert in soils by any means, but what brought this crop in with that 5 inches of water, and some even less because you see it in June, is this soil profile. Lots happens down there with the roots, obviously. Some of our soils hold good water down to 4 or 5 feet. Some don't, but this is the reserve. I'll show you some numbers that whatever was down here is what pulled our crop through, and wheat, all of it. Soybeans needed a rain earlier or in August, where these other crops just kept rooting down. And canola is one of the best tap rooting crops we have. Everybody says sunflowers, well, sunflower is, but canola is very good. Now, this is an old thing. I remember starting here in 80 or 79. The old thing when Terry Gregoire was here, we talked about soils, and the thing that sticks in my mind, and I think all of you guys know it, so it's just a review, but you get an inch of rain, and that should soak down about 6 inches in your soil profile, 1 inch, right? Your second inch, if you got time, will get a foot. So we have about 2 inches of water per foot of soil. Again, depends on how much clay's down there. Yeah. So anyway, so this is what pulled the canola crop through. So here, this is an average I used accumulated. So 1 foot of soil would have 2.5 inches. You go on. So 5 feet of soil depth, good heavy soil, would have 10 inches of stored water. And obviously that's what carried our crop through. You cannot say anything different about it. It was that. And what's so ironic is that we recharged. We were very dry the fall before. We recharged in the spring. And all of you know Daryl Richardson. I know him well. We put end-on sites in together. Very sharp guy. And he even said the winter before, you don't break a drought with snowfall. So I guess we don't have much snowfall. We need snowfall yet. But in the last spring, first time ever, we broke that drought on melted snow. The ground wasn't froze hard. We get 6 inches of rain, snow that soaked in, just back and forth. So we recharged that soil profile better than we thought. But if you understand soils, the flip side is things happen below ground, even if you don't get the water moves laterally, and all of a sudden, so our drain tiling, guys are putting in tiling 50 foot between some of them, and heck, it's improving the soil. So water's moving underneath there every direction. So we're getting some from high water table at the research center in Lang. I know there's a very high water table, so we're recharging. We don't always need it from above. It is coming from the bottom, and that's what again pulled us through. Here's just some, can you guys make that out, I hope? Okay, Canola, this is old term data when they looked at irrigation. 1 inch of rain will produce 4 bushels on average of canola, so 4 bushels is 200 pounds. I went back at Langdon here in 2011 and looked at one of the trials, and around 3,430 pounds and 7 inches of rainfall in the summer. And so it picked up anywhere from 6 to 8 inches in that soil profile. And so that ended up being 228 pounds per inch. And then Langdon just this last year, 2023, one of Brian's trials, 2,510 pounds, at 3.83 inches of rain on that field after it came up, and 2,500 pounds. Anyway, that comes to about 211 pounds per inch of water. So it's what's down in that soil, and how much are you going to store? Are you going to be at that? Some of the sandier soils, you aren't storing more than 4 inches down to 5-6 feet. But these heavy soils, and most of you guys listening, you all have some good heavy soils. So anyway, that's why I emphasize canola taprooted crop. Data I look out of Canada soil stuff where they measure 3 to 6 feet. 6 feet down, you have no problem finding roots in the right soil. So it can go down for that. I said 5 inches might have, or 5 foot depth would have 10 inches of water. We can go to 6 feet, so we might be getting 12 inches of water. So these heavy soils we have to be very fortunate, but lots of things happen. And I think you can relate this to other crops, but it's that taproot of canola that just carries it through. And the biggest water demand for irrigation is flowering to early pod, but obviously we don't want a lot of water then, because then we have our issues with white mold, sclerotinia, and all those things. I'll just go a little quicker here. This is one that I attributed to, I heard one of the consultants, and I've been saying this quite a while. This is numbers, you can't read them, sorry. Blue is a lower amount, 722 to 726 July. 83 degrees here was our average temperature at Langdon through that period. What was unique about 80 or that end of July? We had a lot of smoke. Now you look here, you go down here to Hettinger out here, they didn't have smoke, and they averaged over that 5 days 92. Maybe this will show better. So that's a huge drop. Hettinger usually averages about 3 to 4 degrees cooler than we do, or warmer, because obviously that's a warmer climate. But when you look at this, we were at about 10 to 12 degrees cooler, and it's mostly attributed, I think, to the smoke, these smoky days. Langdon 80, if you can't read it, 80 degrees. Hettinger 93 on the same day. 24th, 82 versus 95 at Hettinger with no smoke cover. So that definitely put the sunglasses on our crop, because I remember there, if you guys do too, we were so dry, and then you got into that July, I think 22nd or 3rd, I remember hearing the forecast on Channel 8, whatever, all the 5 days out, 90, 95 degrees. So, oh boy, that's going to cook it. That's going to be an 88 issue. But nope, we got one day we hit 92. And that was on July 26th, and the rest were cooler. So say it or not, but that smoke, I don't like to give Canadians a lot of credit, but I should give them, because that's what canola came from. Canola came from Canada, so we give them credit for that, but also the smoke that I think really pushed our yields and helped us out. I talk about these years, you can't make them out. Why I'm jumping back for some of you guys is 2007 and 2012. You young people, you weren't probably farming then, but canola was a disaster. Now, I'm not supposed to talk about insects, but it was a disaster. Just 1,200 pound yields, 800,000 at best. And it was all because of aster yellows, and I'll probably talk about it in a bit. And then all the rest of the years were pretty good, but since 2012, they haven't showed up, and it hasn't been an issue, the aster yellows. I'll just go through a few points. Okay, we'll talk about that in a bit. Now, seeding depth, and this is where we got into the spring with that low moisture levels. The seed beds are drying out, and our seeding, all these are important. Your soil moisture, obviously, temperature and all that, but seeding depth, they recommend in Canada, most agronomists, a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. I have no problem when guys called me, I've seen it. When we're that dry like we were, if you can get it down to 1.5 to even 2 inches, I know guys out west that went 2 inches with canola, had a beautiful stand. If the forecast is for hot weather and no rain, you either have to lay it on top or just seed deeper to try and get an even stand. And they say, well, and these agronomists in Canada say, well, boy, if you have some issues, it's going to have a hard time coming up. Yeah, I will if you get a hard rain. But to me, our crop insurance covers us for replant. So if you seed it too deep and you do have some cresting issues, you just go to replant. It really isn't cost you anything except the time. So I think we really have to consider just getting it a little bit deeper on these marginal conditions, because when people talk about a 1/2 inch deep, you hold that in your fingers. If it's a sunny day, you will not have moisture left at a 1/2 inch. It'll be gone unless we get cloudy days and you got some forecasts, then seed shallow for rain. But I think that's a big misnomer, that we do have to just seed deeper under conditions, and you adjust with the conditions at the time. This is a chart on germination on canola, and I see I'm way off on time, but I guess the plan here, after this is done, there'll be a little, what they call it, a round table. And then if you have questions, we can get into that, and I'll just stop the slides here in a bit. I got this chart here about the seed germination. If you can't read it, your canola seed, 5 hours, 12 hours, it kind of busted the seed coat. 17 hours, it kind of the growth, or it was already starting to come out, germinating. 24 hours, you can see already the growth out. And down here's 48 hours, 2 days after you get, and I said, that chart sure looks funny. So there's long-term 4 to 5 days, you'll have a 1-inch stem. So what I did on Friday, it had been Friday, I had some canola. You know, I'm a really conservative, and the wife likes birds, and especially well, what's the finch. So I picked up canola. You got the semi that empties the box before he gets there. So I'm out there to shovel and scoop. Anyway, I had it in the garage. So I said, I want to see if we can do anything. So I sent a germination on these seeds that I had, and it's like been in there probably 5 years, so old, crappy seed. But this chart is right, and I'll just show you. It's 28 hours afterward. I didn't quite get it to 24. And that's a little closer picture. Maybe you can make it out. Definitely germination busting through in 24 hours. Now that's impressive. Of course, and there's a few things that lead to that, and I'll talk about in a bit. And we went to the 48 hours, growth all over. Look at that, 48 hours, 2 days. But seed soil contact, I'll talk about in a bit. This is what resulted in that. So that was very impressive. And 3 days later, growth all over, coleoptiles coming out, their roots with hair all over. And here's the measurement. I kind of had to zoom it up. Over 1/2 inch of growth in the 3rd day. They said you could get up to 1 inch. This is just a chart here, so that's a 1/2 inch. What do I do now? Now there. So pretty impressive, I think, and that's why when we're planting, the conditions have to be right for the seed soil contact, and this is the big key. All your crops, guys, whatever you're going to do out there, the seeding operation is the most important, or planting. We need to get out there and look at every field where that seed is laying. You take the time and do it, and see if you're getting good seed soil contact. And this is just a good example of what you want. More soil around. Obviously, this isn't canola, but any crop relates to. This is poor, and then here you got soil all around, so it's wet. Just like my germination mat was just paper towels, top and bottom. So that seed is surrounded by moisture on every end. That's why, look how quick things happen. If you're in a field situation and you're semi-dry, or you probably get into here, it's going to be pulling in water, but the process will probably take to get it plumped up to germinate probably 5-6 days. So the whole thing on quick emergence is key. And I think we run into this problem more than ever. I talked about this last year, this hair pinning. You guys know more than I do. You run equipment in that, but this is what we have to look out for with more minimum till, especially the disc drills are pushing the seed down. And these are row openers here, but here in the disc drill here, you're pushing that trash right along the seed. So you get that wicking effect, and we just get tough stands unless, the key is, North Dakota will get, unless you get a nice rain within 3-4 days after that, it'll nicely seal it up. You'll get that soil moving around the seed, and you're going to be home free. But if you get like this last year, that just wasn't the case. I'm going to skip some of these trash road cleaners on these planters. Guys out west that have 5,000-10,000 acres of canola, they're going to beat heck with these. I'm going to skip that. So no-till looks good. A little bit on the seeding, and I think we'll just summarize here. We have a guy by Adams that does broadcast seeds canola. has been extremely successful. And broadcasted, I'm talking about the twin bin and your fertilizer spreader, run the seed in so you get it nice. The whirl ones obviously don't work because you can't get even, but even, and that has worked very well. So that can work, but with that, obviously, you need to get the rain shortly after. 2 years ago in Langdon, we had a farmer panel, one that was a conventional drill, John Deere drill, 7.5-inch spacing. And we had one guy at 15 in spacing, one at 22. And each one was very successful of how they did it. So this is a common question this time of the year. Should I go to a 15-inch row if I need a different planter or whatever, 15 or 22? So that's kind of a common question, but my message here is they all work. And as soon as you widen out the rows, though, you do have to drop your seeding rate because you will have lodging issues. And wider rows, need to reduce seeding rates, inter-row competition. And I had one guy that seeded real light and ended up with a good stand, but he didn't like the larger plants, so they didn't lodge. Get that big stem, you aren't going to have lodging, but very slow combining. It's going to slow you down, so you're going to have to say, well, the hired man, we're just going to go slow because we're saving some on seed and we kept it standing instead of having lodging issues. Just measuring. These didn't come. This was just a row here, how things came up uneven this year. Here was a 6-inch spacing, so we got 12 in between. And these two runs came up. This one didn't. It came later, and there wasn't a single pod on that one that came, 3 weeks later. So it just took some moisture, but these are things. So keep everything in perspective. Oh, I'm so disappointed in these numbers. I thought they'd show up good. Okay, as you guys were this spring, and so everybody luckily was a little different. This is again the blue. This is from June 1 to June 20th. Very dry here. Langdon did get a rain on like June 4th or 5th. That helped get their stands even, but we had a pocket here from Milton down to Adams and down in here where they had no rain from May 20th to June 22nd. So guys that were in that area, what did you do? You either seeded shallow, just waited for the rain, or you tried to seed a little bit deeper. And if you did with the right conditions, you had a good stand. So we had everybody all over the board on that. But so it didn't come up until June 22nd, but that crop came out good. I just got some pictures. That whole slug will follow this one field through here. I hope you can make it out enough. This is on July 5th. Okay, June 22nd is when the rain came, okay? The first rain. And you can't see, but this is all little canola. So these runs came up right away in end of May when the guy planted it. And it was several thousand acres. These few runs here, a little bit deeper, came up across the field. So this ends up being a June 22nd planting date, basically. And we know canola can do well seeded late, but that's from the later I've seen for that kind of yield. Anyway, it ran like 2,500 pounds, but here we'll progress through it. That little bit didn't bother. It's these 50-50 stands we had issues. It's kind of, you can see the tree in the background. Here's those strips that came up early. Obviously, they were crowded right out. Beautiful heavy canola by, August 18th. Ripened up good. They killed it, harvested in the first part of October. So that was successful. This was another one, a whole bunch of slides, but this half came up, half didn't, 60%. And then what do? So we have these two stages out there, and typically we'd say it's trouble, start over. But with these pod shatter varieties, what a step in the right direction. I mean, if you have them, you can have that month different planting date, and they just made up for it. They hung together, and we had some very, very successful things. You can see the ripe, obviously, and the immature. So it worked out good this year, and you'd have said, nah, boy, with that 50-50 stand, but you couldn't do anything about it. And you just had to let it go, and it ended up really good for most guys. I got to clarify, for most guys. And here's another field lodged heavily. It all came up after the June 22nd rain. And then this had mixed stand, but very lodged. And so on October 23rd, and we got the rain or the snow end of October. It was on November 12th, still out there. And once you know, the conditions got better, and this was on December 7th, finished combining it. We had several, probably 10,000 acres up north that were late like that or caught in the snow, and it ended up being really good. And I put this in one of my newsletters, so if you got that lodged canola, and it's pretty elementary, one guy corrected me, but if you have lodged crop, right? This is just observation, they got lodged crop, so you want to come with the combine against it to pick it up. For two of the guys that did it, it worked better to go with the lodge. It went really slow, and that's what this did here, crossway. Obviously, you can see the way, the direction of the field, and picked up just about everything. Cut a few pods off because you're going with, but it happened to feed better than going the other way. Otherwise, it pushed up. It was so tall, canola, and this kind of kept it down. So it's kind of interesting observation. Like, so you don't know, it lodged, you try different directions, but I thought that was really interesting. Got it off, and this one was north by Milton. I think this was like 2,800 pound in the elevator after that snow, and didn't come up till June 22nd. So just phenomenal stories, but we know it can happen, and that's why I share this. It's just some more. You always have sign a good canola crop that this is straight of this green stubble, and especially this year where we weren't wet, no disease. That's always tells you if you got that green stubble behind you, disease-free crop. And that's where a lot of this yield come from. No sclerotinia to speak of, no blackleg, and this just really, really helped us out there. This, yeah, you guys have this, the swather turned white back in September. This was part of the 2 stages of canola out there. There's some late green ones, and this is powdery mildew. It didn't hurt a thing, but messed up the swather pretty bad. This was from 3 years ago, and we had it again this year. And it's just powdery mildew. Doesn't really hurt the crop, just on the leaf, but that stuff will just get slimy on the header and that. So again, not alarming, but what a mess. So everybody has headaches, not only you guys. So the guy was harrowing his stubble, and there went his John Deere tire. But anyway, I saw 4 different combines that burnt this fall in my travels around, still out in the field. This was actually a canola field. I never found out what really caused it, but anyway. How we doing? Okay. Seeding rates, I'm not going to really say a lot. You match up your seed bag, your counts with whatever the seed guys want. We can talk about this a little bit more later, but we're definitely dropping the seeding rates down. Langdon, I don't know, Brian, do you still use the 600,000? Huh? Yeah, 435. Oh. So anyway, we want to establish that 5 to 7 per square foot, but we can talk about that another time. I don't want to bore you. I want to show this because I did that a few years ago with the plant stand of how that small stand. This is at Langdon, May 21st planting, ran 3,559 pounds, and it only had 26% of the stand established. So that was 150,000 pure live seed per acre, and it was a top yielder. So the canola, as we know, will compensate like crazy. Just don't ever forget your sulfur. I think we all are pretty well trained to that thought. Can go excess nitrogen for lodging. Generally, the thing is 150 pounds of total N, and soil applied plus soil is going to get you to 2,500 pound. And the year's right, you'll still get into the 3,000. Sulfur, I just use the numbers here, what it would cost you at our prices here the other day. I always recommend at least 10 pounds, but preferably 10 to 15 of AMS. So 10 pounds would cost you $4.30 an acre. We get into the 15, this ratio, 656, but I'd take only 30 pounds of canola at 22 cents to get it back. And same thing at 20 pounds, obviously the return, you'd need 40 pound canola at 22 cents. But deficient soils, 500 pounds, I've seen 1,000 pounds. And I'm going to mention this to close, I think. We won't get into the other nitrogen sulfur ratio. I know Dave Franzen says we really can't go by it, but I'll tell the story, and some of you heard before. And I had pictures in my old office, and of course we had old cameras then, and we had to send in the film, and I don't know where they went in between. But anyway, the farmer is up toward Walhalla, planted his canola, and all of a sudden there were these little triangles were beautiful big pods, and all the rest was just little stubby pods or no pods. Well, what happened is back in the day, you guys, in the 80s when we had hydrous, it wasn't that popular, but a lot of guys you made 2 passes around the field, and then actually you'd shut it off, and when you made one of your headland, but kind of turned out anyway, there was a little triangle on the headland that he didn't get the anhydrous. So you aren't going to make a whole extra lap to cover those little triangles. And that's where the beautiful canola was. The rest was fertilizer nitrogen. There was nothing on that spot. And it was probably 1,500 pound canola. And where he put the nitrogen, it was like 500 pounds. Just amazing. So that ratio is important. So if you ever have a field with high nitrogen excess, make sure you get plenty of sulfur out there. We had a case here a few years ago up by Hannah. where there was a misapplication of nitrogen. It went on the wrong field and the guy already had put nitrogen on. So we're trying to figure out what to do and wanted to grow canola. So what we did actually is put more AMS on there, put a whole bunch on there, AMS to get that ratio more to the 7:1, and ended up with just 3,500 pound canola. Stood well, seeded low, only a like 200 pure live seed, and you just row it. It was on 22-inch spacing, so we had a wider row, less seed, stronger stalks, no lodging, and just almost a record yield for on a mistake. So we actually, when we add AMS to get the sulfur, we're adding more nitrogen. So we had a double nitrogen, like 300 pounds, and then we're putting more N on just to get that sulfur up there and the ammonium sulfate. So anyway, kind of interesting thing. Diamondback moth, I don't know how we're doing, Anita. We should probably, some of you guys maybe want to get your credits. We have more things we'll talk about on this roundtable, and I can probably talk more about Diamondback moth, which I think really took a lot of yield for some guys. The last in 19 and 21 and this year.